Thank you for joining me tonight.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And thanks everyone for joining Noah Sanders and myself tonight for this looking back at, we're going to look in the past at the Lamplighter Guild and looking toward the future for this coming summer with horticulture and master teacher, Noah Sanders. Noah, we're going to pray first, and then we're going to get right into it without any delay. Father, bless us, please. Thank you for helping us to overcome the technical difficulties again. And pray that tonight will be a real creative time of looking into the resources you've given us and how to prepare and to garden, to prepare for the future, to not have our head in the sand, to see the signs of the times and how we're supposed to prepare as families so that we're not dependent on the government and we're totally dependent upon you. So guide us in our discussion tonight. May it be beneficial to all who listen. And I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay.
Amen.
Well, welcome everyone to the Lamplighter Guild with Master Teacher Noah Sanders, who wrote the one book that was my favorite called Born Again Dirt. How long ago was that book, Noah?
I believe it was 2012.
2012. And I think I read it that year, actually, because I was very interested, started following Joel Salatin and what you guys were doing, and then finally got to meet you. I'll never forget the first time you were here, but did I come down there first or did you come here first?
I came up there in the cold April and for a couple days first before we decided for sure to go ahead with the guild.
Yeah. Was it, did it snow when you were here?
No, it was like the first few beautiful sunny days that you said you had.
Oh, cool. So I've had the opportunity to be down at Noah's farm down there, and that's pretty amazing. And Noah's been up here. This will be your third or fourth guild.
Well, I believe it was 2018 was the first.
And you've been here every year?
Well, save last year, yeah.
Okay, so let's get right into it. So those of you that are first time learning from Noah Sanders, Noah, I believe, is one of the masters in horticulture. He has his own farm. We're going to talk about that, Noah. But I want to get right into your four main philosophies, your worldview of farming. It has left an imprint on my life. I want to start right off with a bang here so that people get the gist of what makes your world work so well and so successful. Can I quote them and then you tell me if I'm right? Because it'd be kind of like, okay, so I'm your student. And so folks, as you're listening, Noah taught me these principles in 2018. And the last time I heard them mentioned was probably, you weren't here last year?
No, I came and just spoke last year.
Okay, so probably I heard them again last year.
Yes, you did.
So here they go. Number one, do things on time.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Number two, do things with a high standard of excellence.
Yes, correct.
Number three, minimal waste.
Correct.
And four, always with joy.
Yes.
Okay. How did you come up with those principles and unpack all of those principles so that people are listening can really take these principles and make them a part of their life and explain how it will affect their lives. I want to start here. I think this is the most important part.
Yeah, so they're not original to me. They come from some mentors of mine in Zimbabwe, Africa. And it really came out of a desire to help the poor and wrestling with poverty and how do you help somebody come out of poverty. And you know, all of us as Christians want to, at the end of our life, receive well done, good and faithful servant, right? That's kind of like, that's what we're looking for. That we want to live in such a way that we get a well done, good and faithful servant. And that comes from the parable of the talents, where the master entrusts each one of his servants with a different, set of things for when he went away on a journey. And then when he came back, he evaluated their faithfulness on whether they had increased, what they had been entrusted with. And so what we're really, those four principles are all about kind of how we can be faithful with what God's given us. So often we look at, we evaluate, well, how many resources do I have? It's all about resources. It's all about, like in the farming world, it's all about techniques. What techniques can you have? Or in the theological world, how much do you know? But at the end of the day, God really cares about how we're obeying, how we're actually putting boots on what we know. And what I've seen so many people fail in agriculture is normally not because of a head knowledge. It's because of poor management, of unfaithfulness, of not doing what we know we're supposed to do anyways, having too many irons in the fire so that we can't actually do things faithfully. And like this last winter, I had a few cows die because I didn't keep track of them like I knew I should have. I didn't keep track of how much they were eating. And I know it's because of my unfaithfulness. It wasn't that I didn't know what to do. And when we're unfaithful and we see that loss, it's really just a God showing us through his mercy, when you're unfaithful, I'm going to take away from you. And it's a warning sign. It's an indicator that you need to change something. And what it does is it robs us of joy. And that is really important. When we lose that joy, we need to take note, because often it's a signal that's telling us we've lost touch somehow with where God wants us to be. And we need to reevaluate what he's given us and whether we are reflecting basically his attributes, who he is. And those 4 principles are just a simple way to kind of measure and to encourage ourselves to be faithful. So on time really is just a way to reflect who God is. He's a God of order. He's a God of timeliness. He does everything in season throughout history. And so if we don't do things on time, if we're late, if we were late to this meeting, right, then it would have wasted everybody's time. If we were late planting my crops, then I'm wasting theirs. So the more we can line up with being on time, the more faithful we're being with what God's given us. And then the excellence has to do with reflecting God's wholeheartedness. Go ahead.
So we're gonna end this episode tonight, and we're gonna go to horticulture now. Thank you, Noah, for spending time with us tonight. It's so convicting, Noah. It's so convicting.
Because it's not like I've gotten it down pat. I mean, it's that the basics that we fail in all the time, but we've got to be reminded of, because it seems like, oh yeah, timeliness, got that one checked, move on. Well, the important thing that we think we need to do tomorrow often gets hindered by my failure in that little simple thing again.
So I've got 70 trees, mostly black walnut trees, cut down into huge, they're huge. And I was going to take them to the sawmill to get them milled so that we can use them for flooring or whatever we wanted to use them for, cabinetry. It's worth a lot of money. Imagine 70 huge trees. These are 2 foot to 3 foot in diameter. And they've been sitting there going on their 4th year right now, out in the woods, getting punky. And, it's not that it's not important to me. I think about it all the time, but I have too many irons in the fire to be faithful in what God gave me. He gave me 60 acres of woods, and I was cutting it down to bring them to the sawmill. I've done it before, but now I got overextended and too busy. And now I just feel like if I don't do it like within the next month, I'm going to lose it. But I feel like what you just said, God's now getting ready to take something away from me that he gave to me, as a resource. And so that's just really convicting. You lost those 2 cows. And, so Noah, before we go on to excellence and minimal waste and always with joy, so what do you say to people that are overextended? How do we get this back into check? What are the scriptures that challenge us to get back into balance?
Yeah, well, I think the basic principle of understanding that what God requires of us is always going to require him and his strength to enable us to do it. But we can never blame, to blame God when I'm tempted in my heart to say, I could have done everything you wanted me to do, God, if you had given me enough time and enough energy and enough money and enough people to help me. And that's extremely ungrateful and accusing God of stinginess and not giving me what I need. So what I have to realize is if that's true, then almost always it's a case of me wanting to do what God has given me to do, plus what I also want to do.
My time, not, yeah. What I
And
want to do is most
so
important.
God's like, no, 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 like you're my servant. You know, a servant doesn't just like clock in for a few hours and then like he's got his own time. We're all in. We've only got a short amount of time, and he's going to give us everything we need to do what he wants us to do. And I think it doesn't mean that we're going to not feel stretched. We're not going to feel weak or foolish or inadequate, because he wants to keep us in that place where we need him and we need his strength. But at the end of the day, it is, if our standards of timeliness fall, if our excellence falls, if our waste is increasing, then it means we're trying to do too much. And in humility, we need to acknowledge the limits God's put on us, retreat to within those limits, and then recognize that then he actually will add to us in a way that we would never be able to experience outside of that.
That's good. That's really good. Wow. Thank you for that. Okay, let's go on. Next is doing everything with excellence.
Yep. So God is a God of wholeheartedness, and he loves, I mean, look at anything God does, he is not a God that's like, oh, well, yeah, that flower, it just, I think he did that at the end of the end of the day and kind of put a little bit into it. No, he loves for us to be not lukewarm, but wholehearted, and he loves excellence. And we see, as ambassadors for the Lord in what we're doing, there's a big part of experiencing him through, actually doing things that are done in a way that's worth doing. I think at Lamplighter, we see such a great example of that in just the books, right? That y'all produce and the whole guild experience. But in my farm, for instance, if I am trying to plant and my spacing is just kind of wompy and all over the place, and I'm not really getting equal fertilizer on the plot, and just my standard, you go out there and everything looks crooked and kind of half put in. Not only does it kind of decrease your pride or kind of your commitment in your work, but it's extremely low. It's not very efficient, because you're like cutting corners here and there, and it's all those little things put together that end up costing at the end. And we found that when you start with excellence, you pull that first row and it's beautiful, it's lined up with everything, then it just motivates you to want to do more, and when you see one weed in there because you've done a great job of preparing it, you're like, great, pull that thing out. And I think when people see excellence in a very small area, it's like George Washington Carver said, if you do common things of life in an uncommon way, you'll command the attention of the world. And, there's a lot of big stuff out there that's done okay, but you can have a very small thing done exceptionally well, and it will really command the attention of the world.
That's beautiful. Whatever that hand finds to do it with all your might. And Noah, that what you just said is so key, because when you do something really, really well, and it costs us something, right? It takes a lot of energy, time, expense. It's really something. So I wrote a thesis one time, and it took me 2 years to write it. And I spent, probably anywhere from 7 to 10 hours a night, okay? Like into 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, for months, not just days, months studying this. And today, 20 years later, I still have great joy in the work that was done. I get to teach it everywhere, and now we're going to write a children's book from it. And we just, Noah, you won't believe this. So just this 2 weeks ago, my assistant, Sarah, and I decided we were going to use this. I was teaching this semester to the students here, and we decided, why don't we do a musical drama with this thesis? So I rewrote it for a stage play, and next Friday night, it's going to be our very first musical drama here at Lamplighter. And so I was thinking, like, when we do something really, really well, when we just go all the way to the end and make it so beautiful, and here it was a thesis, something that, I was extremely proud of that. And it took a lot to do it, but now I still get to enjoy it 20 years later. It kind of has been recreated. The way you use it, it changes over time. We can use it in many different ways, and imagine the same thing with your gardening.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's the idea of if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I don't think many of us really want to invest the time in something that we can't really do wholeheartedly, you know? And I think it's, that's where a big passion of mine is helping us be inspired that the everyday, you know, what stuff seems mundane and normal, like God cares about it. And he wants us to do it in a way that produces that joy.
That's great.
That allows us to, you know, experience his pleasure in us doing what we were created to do, you know, and redeeming the stuff that has been corrupted and kind of rediscovering that as Jesus, you know, helps us.
I think he joins, and I don't think it, I know it. He joins with us. It says in 2 Peter 1, it says that his divine, you know, we have a divine partnership, you know, that we escape the lustful corruptions that are in the world. And then we together, it's a divine partnership. He's given us these promises so that we can experience his divine partnership to do the things that he's called us to do. We can't do these things without him. You know, like when you're going to be up here this summer, I mean, we're going to tackle some things we've never done before. You know, before we get into, you know, minimal waste and joy, just talk a little bit about what you anticipate doing this summer here at the Guild with solar panels, for example.
Yeah, so in the past, a big focus of ours has been on horticulture and agriculture, but really a big passion of mine is just the whole idea of stewardship in general. And I think that you know, Christians have a pretty bad reputation for not appreciating the amazing resources that God has put around us. And so there's this, so we want to expand the kind of the scope. We still want to focus on horticulture, and, you know, really my passion for what I want people to go away with that you know, participate in the class is, first of all, I want us to like love Jesus more because we've experienced who he is and seen that more in his creation, and again, have a better appreciation for that. I want us to be able to, you know, students to be able to go away equipped to grow a productive garden that reflects God's wisdom, but also reflects who Jesus is. And then the part we want to add this year is really looking at not only the soil, but the other amazing natural resources God's put at our disposal, like the sun, like water, like gravity, like, you know, even possibly talking about animals or wood, and the way that we can utilize that for energy, to just expand our ideas beyond just this typical consumer mentality that we have in our culture, that because of the marketing, you know, culture that we have, it's all about you can fix all your problems through some service or product that you purchase. Whereas God's really he wants us to be like co-creators with him in being productive. So for instance, my family and I this last winter, like right now, our home is off grid. So like the electricity that I'm using for this call, for our internet, for the lights and everything, we collected it on our solar panels today, and it was stored in a battery. And now that's what I'm using, you know, rather than paying for, you know, a company to produce it and import it to me. And then our water that we're using in our house is high pressure water. In fact, I have to put pressure regulators on it to keep it from blowing out my system. But it's just from a simple ram pump that uses water flow, gravity, to pump water just from using water without electricity. And that pressurizes our whole home. And then we have hot water right now from our wood stove that we have a line going through. So it's got a thermal siphon. And so as we're running and cooking or heating our home, it's also heating the water that we can use. So I can currently, you know, even if the power's off, I can take a hot pressurized shower without electricity by candlelight, you know, in my home, which is so cool. And you're thinking all this abundant like energy has been around us the whole time. You know, I just haven't taken the time to tap into it. And so, you know, not everybody can do solar panels because you might live in a part that's cloudy. You can't, maybe you might not have a little, an area that you could do a ram pump. But if we could, I would like to see if we can hook a ram pump up to one of your ponds. And I'd like to try to bring some solar panels so we can talk about those systems. I'd love to talk about making your own biogas digester to make methane that you can cook with from just waste from your kitchen. I'd love to talk about the idea of wood-fired, did you know they used to run cars off of wood, firewood in World War II? When they didn't have very much gas, they could put it and they would use the smoke and clean it and run it through the car, and they would run cars off of just like firewood in World War II. They knew how to do that. And we just, so there's all these neat things that hopefully people can go back with a greater appreciation of what is there around me that I could be creative to ask God, how can I tap into this stuff?
Okay, wait a minute. So in my head, I'm picturing me driving down the road, putting some wood into the the floorboard there to keep the car going. That's not what you're talking about, is it?
No, well, so one of the things we have to realize, because a lot of the reasons that I'm interested in, for instance, learning a lot of off-grid stuff on my home, it's not because I think everybody should do that, but I think that there is this idea that if you fall into only being a consumer, if you're a consumer for everything that you require for survival, then you are beholden to whoever provides that completely. And we all have dependencies of one sort or another. But it's prudent as Christians to say, are the things or people I'm depending on dependable? And that can vary from time to time. Are they people that I share, agree with in worldview? Am I partnering with believers or unbelievers? And we live in an imperfect world, so there's never, a perfect, economy where you can only partner with people that you trust and stuff. But especially as, we're hear about and involved with the church around the world that's persecuted, especially when people don't have the ability to provide basic necessities for themselves, then it can really hinder their ability to, be free to just serve the Lord and advance his kingdom. And God can work within those restraints, but I think that he's given us a lot more than we fail to take credit for, that we could use to have a degree of freedom that you don't when you're 100% dependent on other people to give you those things each day. And the point, I guess, that I wanted to go back to in relation to what you're saying about that wood-fired car is, it is not a glamorous thing. It is not an easier thing. It is a humbling thing to produce and rely on what you're producing ourselves. I did a training the other week, and we had some people here, and the reality is we're down in the basement, and I'm like, I think we're gonna run out of the batteries before we're done with this session. And lo and behold, we did. So I'm like, we're gonna go crank up the generator, and then voila, there we are back again. But that's just, it's when you, for instance, the ram pump, when something happens and it's not working, guess who gets to go fix it in the middle of the night? Me.
Yeah.
So we have to realize that there is that idea of, when we, for instance, as Christians, want to step away and disentangle ourselves in any way, shape, or form from the world, because we feel like there's some negative aspect that for us personally, the cost is too high. Maybe it's engaging in media to a certain level, or social media, or certain technologies. We all had to ask the Lord, is this helping me be more effective for you or less effective in my life? And that may not be the same for everybody. But when God does call us to, maybe you should have a flip phone instead of a smartphone. Oh, well, that'd be so cool, and it'll go back to like just flip phone. Saying, I did that earlier this year. And in one sense, it's very refreshing just to have a flip phone. On the other sense, it's extremely inconvenient. So there's always, it's not this like homesteading or off-grid living or, kind of trying to set yourself free from dependency comes with just this, without sacrifice, I guess is what I'm saying. And that means that we as Christians need to be very clear what is valuable and what is it that we value, and what are the things that we need to be willing to give up if God calls us to in our life.
I think one of the things we got to just come to grips with is that we in the United States have had it so well for so long. We have become dependent. We're watching in our area here in Western New York State, we're watching the government, buy up land like crazy. We're watching, solar panels taking over farmlands, tens of thousands of solar panels. And it's changing the landscape of our communities. I've never seen anything like this. It's like, where is this coming from? How did these people overnight come in here and take over all these farms? These farms are gone. And so my head's not in the sand anymore. I never dreamed this would happen here. And so we've become so dependent upon the government, upon the way things are. that I think it's only prudent to say maybe we need to start being a little bit more aware of what's happening in our world, and becoming a little bit more less dependent in the little things that we can do. Like you said, do something well with the little that we have, and then watch God bless that little. Okay, so next is, I want to get into some of these questions that people have. Next is minimal waste. What do you mean by that?
So we live in a fallen world, so there's always going to be, like, there's inevitably waste because we're not going to do things perfectly. But I would normally define waste as unnecessary loss. There's something that you lost, for instance, for me, the cows, or for you, maybe the trees, that we didn't have to lose, right? But we did. And I think this idea just reflects, we're trying to, again, reflect who God is. And it's always fascinating to me to read the parable of, or the story about the miracle of the loaves and the fish, because Jesus takes this handful of loaves and fish and miraculously multiplies it to feed 5,000 men plus women and children. And it's just this generosity and this abundance. And then at the end, he's like, make sure you go around and pick up everything that's left over so we don't waste anything. If I'm the disciples, I mean, I'm sure it was acres and acres that they had to comb over to try to get this stuff. They're like, let's just feed the birds. You can make some more tomorrow, But God not only is abundant, but he values every little aspect of stuff. And this whole idea of redemption is God is not a God who wastes. When something is broken, he doesn't just throw it away and make something new. When Noah, was broken, he didn't just throw me away and make a new Noah. Like, he restored and redeemed and made me the Noah that he meant for me to be, right? And so that's kind of part of the reflection of that. In part, also, minimal waste is kind of the idea of appreciating and being grateful for everything God's given us. When the water falls on our land, we should value that. Try to capture it, try to utilize it. Don't let it just wash our soil away, and just think, well, whatever, it's just, but like, be grateful for every little aspect. Even as I'm trying to learn to appreciate the resources around our farm, to not waste them, it should be not of a heart of greed or a heart of fear or anything like that, but out of a heart of gratitude for what God's given me, and a sense of responsibility to utilize that to the best of my ability so that he can use me to bless others even better.
Okay, speaking of irrigation and soil erosion, just before we get into the last one with always with Joy, tell the people about your statistics on soil erosion.
So when we talk about horticulture, what we try to do in our approach is we try to say we want everything that we do, and horticulture is just an example of this, to spring from the heart of Jesus, to be founded on Jesus, his humility, unselfishness, and faithfulness. And so when we look at methods of how we can approach agriculture, we're trying to say, in humility, God knows a lot more about farming than we do. So we're just going to try to develop some techniques that looks at the way our Father does it in nature and tries to copy that. So with tending the soil and preparing it for planting, we try to look at what are some principles we can see from God's creation. And the two principles we teach in our classes as an example is, one is there's no regular deep inversion plowing in nature like we see sometimes on farms or in gardens. It is something that, you have a little disturbance through the bugs or through the birds scratching or, something rooting around. But in general, there's not this, 6 to 8 inches flipping on its head every year. And then the second is that there's always a mulch cover on the ground, like God's blanket covering everything. And so what Mark is referring to is just how amazing it is when we violate those two principles that we see of design and creation. There was a test done where there were two identical plots. One applied the principles, one didn't. So this one over here, let's say, was plowed and no mulch. So this is kind of the traditional way. Over here, this is God's way. This is no plowing and mulch. And then when they applied a simulated rainfall on it, this field over here that was plowed with no mulch, 90% of the water ran off and only 10% actually infiltrated into the soil. And then over here, this field, 94% infiltrated and only 6% ran off. So just through that simple observing of God's creation and applying it, we now are saving you know, almost 90% of the water more than we were before of that, and we're not wasting it. And that's not just because we're trying to be so smart, but we're trying to come in just childlike humility, like Jesus said, I only do what I see my Father doing. And that's kind of the heart that we want to approach it, not saying we know best and this is the only way to do it. But we want people to go away with recognizing the more we can try to do things God's way, the less waste there is. And that applies to relationships or marriages or parenting or, economics or anything like that. The more you tend to see man's ways produce waste, and God's ways, when we approach it in humility and just do what he says and watch what he does, tends to be so efficient and utilize almost everything.
So are you saying that I can't rototill and plow my fields?
No, I'm saying that I'm not going to recommend it, but yeah, it's not the thing is, it's not a legalistic aspect. The point I would want to know is, are you asking God in humility how you should tend your soil? And a lot of people, the reason that they're doing it the way they're doing it is because they just have never even let Jesus address that area of their life.
Wow.
So I'm not so concerned about what technique you use as much as who you're looking to for your, for that, like for your source of information in a sense.
It's so much easier. And when you were here, you guys took those spades and you just kind of took the top layer of the weeds and grass off. It took some time, but at the end, you had this perfect garden area that was ready to be, to sow seed. And you would sow the seed by digging with your spade. You had those, what type of, by the way, people are going to want to know this. I bought a couple spades that Noah recommended. What's the name of those pointed spades that I still use them. They're so good.
I think you may be referring to like a hoe, right?
Yeah,
Instead
the hoe.
of like a shovel.
Yeah.
Right. So those are, I think the company is what is it? Rogue hoe.
Yeah. Rogue.
But it's really Rogue hoe. It's really any hoe that's what would be considered a heavy field hoe. So it's made of heavy metal, and it allows you to do a little bit heavier work than the traditional hoes or sheet metal, and they're just kind of for light, like weeding and stuff. So
yeah, ROGUE, I believe, Rogue hoe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And those hoes, they changed the way we do farming here. It's just so much easier to dig, and so you're not against then digging the rows with those hoes, just digging the whatever it is, 2 to 3, 4 inch trench, as you're planting your seed. That doesn't violate any of those principles, correct?
Well, there's a lot of techniques, a way of okay, how can we minimally disturb the soil? And the goal is to say long term, like we want to, as we study how the soil works, it's not beneficial to it to pulverize it every single year. It's not actually helping it. Now, the first year, if it's all bumpy and you got roots and like stumps and all that, then just do what you need to get the site prepped. But then you don't have to do that every year after that anymore. So when we prep a plot, we normally just try to remove the grass either with hose, or you can tarp it and smother it if you have time to do that. And then we lay it off and mulch it, and then we'll just open the mulch and then plant in directly in the soil. And it's amazing, underneath the mulch, even without plowing of any sort, the ground is extremely crumbly and friable. If you've ever had a board out in the yard or something that's killed the grass, normally when you flip it up and you look underneath it, it's not hard packed. It's actually quite crumbly and easy to work because of all the microbes who've been breaking it up.
So that's one of the reasons why you don't want to disturb the soil that much, because there's all kinds of, it's a living environment. All of the organisms are working together.
Yeah, and there's an honor and a respect that we want to have for anything that's living, just because scripturally there seems to be commands that are directly related to, there's a right way to treat things that are alive, in a way that dishonors the life that God gives them. And interestingly, as far as I can tell in scriptures, rest was always commanded, for anything living that you worked. So you had the animals, you had your servants, you had all that. And then it also referred to the land as well. Like it almost treats the land as a living thing, even though, it's not a living organism. But when you know what's in the soil and how much of a brilliant living system that's fertilizing plants all the time is in the dirt, you would see why God would want you to respect that in the way that you tended it.
Okay, so Noah, give us a little bit of a glimpse. We'll end with joy at the very end, but give us a glimpse of what your life is like, a day and a week on your farm. You have how many children?
We have 6 kids.
6 children, a wife, and you guys are busy there. Okay, very busy. And your oldest child is how old?
10.
10 years old. Okay, so you're homeschooling.
Yep.
You're producing your own energy with God's help. You live on a rather large farm, and give us an idea of what your day and week is like. What else are you? What are you doing with? What makes you feel fulfilled in what you're doing? Are you being fulfilled in what you're doing? And why are you doing what you're doing?
I love that, because it's what we need to be always asking ourselves, and it's great to hear from people the why behind stuff. I got started in agriculture, partly because I was homeschooled myself. Really had a dad that invested a lot in me to disciple me. Personally, I was one of those kids that just loved doing anything with my hands. I love being outside. I love pretending to live off the land. I read My Side of the Mountain when I was little, that takes place up there in your neck of the woods, and I love the idea of just of being a producer, rather than a consumer, going out and building and making stuff and living off the land. And, if you want to start a family, that kind of like rustic bush lifestyle is not, super conducive to raising a family. So homesteading and kind of that is a little more civilized way to do that. But I also really benefited a lot from the lifestyle of discipleship that I experienced growing up, that my mom and dad kind of facilitated with me and my siblings. And so I wanted to have the ability to do that with my kids as well. So the lifestyle of being able to work together as a family was a big motivation for me getting into agriculture. I was always looking for something I could do. My dad did some work with computer software that he was able to work in the evenings on the weekends. But I was like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if there was something I could do that it could be a bit more of a full lifestyle. And then also, as I saw agriculture, there's a lot of challenges in agriculture. There's not a lot of, you have kind of the Chuck Bentleys and the Dave Ramseys of the world, like applying Christian principles to finance and stuff. And you have people applying it to a lot of different areas. But at the end of the day, there's very few people. Joel Salatin's a refreshing, example of that. But very few people like overtly applying God's word to agriculture. And there's so many broken aspects of it with unprofitability and, farmer suicide and everybody telling me when I was growing up, you can't make a living farming and stuff. And so I was like, I want to figure out what God's solutions are for making this work. So that was another motivation getting into it. But also, I felt like it was what God gave me to do. And I felt like doing that was going to be how he chose to glorify himself and allow me to serve others with good food and allow our family to be able to interact with and share the love of Jesus with people. It's interesting because I don't know actually if I've shared this with you or not, but would be our 14th year of commercial farming where we're selling vegetables to other people. And we actually felt like the Lord told us this spring to shut down our commercial farm, and just to focus on teaching other people how to grow food, multiplying leaders who can serve communities to meet their spiritual and physical needs through good stewardship of the land. So we're shifting our focus right now to primarily homesteading, where we're growing our own food as a model for others and for ourselves. And then we're hosting trainings here on our farm to be able to bring people in to see what that looks like. But we've been making a living growing food for 30 families over the past, that's the particular model we've been using over the past 5 or 6 years. And as far as my daily life, it looks like in the evening, in the mornings, get up and have some Bible reading and go and do the chores, where right now we are milking a cow. My son Enoch, oldest son Enoch, comes with me. We feed the pigs, we do the chickens, we water the plants, we bottle feed the cows, we feed the sheep. We do all that early in the morning. Then we come back and then normally my wife and I have meetings to, in the evenings or the mornings to kind of get on the same page, because when you work together as a family, that communication between husband and wife and parents and kids is very vital, because otherwise everybody's like, what is going on? In a company, you have that meetings, you have that vision, you communicate it. And we're finding that that's really something that we're having to do as a family, and make sure we take time for that each day. And then eating breakfast together as a family. And then our work varies. That's the interesting thing on a farm, is some days you're working on projects with infrastructure. Some days you're planting. Some days you're cultivating or harvesting or putting up stuff. Some days you're driving to get chicken feed. And so normally our days have different projects going on. And then in the evening, chores again. And then our family, meal together, reading together as a family, singing together as a family. And then after the kids go to bed, my wife and I be able to meet and talk and figure out, kind of what we're doing the next day. But it's very much a together, very much a lifestyle where a lot of the things we would normally go and do, like go and exercise and go and do this activity or whatever, is a little more integrated throughout the day. And you've got to kind of make sure you appreciate that along the way.
No, Noah, so I did something similar, only mine backfired on me. I'll just give everyone just a brief story of it. So my wife and I lived on a 2,000-acre estate, and I was in seminary full time. I was the caretaker. I had the privilege of, I always dreamed of living on a farm. And so here we were on this 2,000-acre estate. Actually, it was connected to a state park, so I'm not really sure how many acres it was. It was very large. Wealthy people owned it. And I was going to seminary. I was also the principal of a Christian school during that time. And so here I was working at the Christian school part-time, and I was in seminary full-time, and I was the caretaker of this large estate. And I had to do, about 12,000 bales of hay. I had 70 sheep, 22 horses, and I did not know what I was doing either. But I had this dream of raising my kids. We were homeschooling. I wanted them to grow up on a farm to just, learn about work ethic and all of these things. But because I had my focus in so many different areas, seminary, principal in a school, the farm, my kids, my kids didn't enjoy it. It was always rushed, always hurried. And there was no joy in it. For me, there was no joy in it. I'm sure my kids enjoyed a lot of it, but there was no joy in it for me because I never had time to really do anything really well. And as a result, I ended up getting sick, actually. And so I just wondered, like, there's a lot of people out there that would love to do some of these things, but what do you tell people like me out there? How would you readjust that so that you don't lose your joy, and and your kids are really benefiting, your family's benefiting from what you're doing? What would you say to us?
It's a good question. And I think the formula is really pressing in to God to get super clarity on what he's actually telling you to do and what you just want to do. Or what you're wanting to do too soon, or keep doing that you should drop. For me, like with our commercial farm, our farming business was exactly what I've always dreamed it would be. It's what I've, and we loved it. We love our customers. And it was really like, once we got to the point we felt like God said, to do what I want you to do, that's the end of this, is the end of that season. Because you can't have family life and run a full-time farm business and equip people to feed themselves with the kind of responsibility I've given you. And so to say no to that, to give it up, seems like a loss. But I think recognizing whenever we say yes, we're always saying no to something else. Mm-hmm. Whenever we're saying yes to another thing, we're saying no to how well we could do something else. And so that there's only one thing we have to do well in life, and that is listen to and obey Jesus. And so we don't feel like don't need to feel like we need to do everything. I have a friend, some friends and stuff that's like they want to do everything because it's kind of like we got to save the world, we got to do all these things and help the community and all that. It's like, I think imagine in a company, you have one employee that their job is manning the front desk, but they feel this huge responsibility for the people in accounting and the people in HR and the people in the shipping department, and they're trying to help and do everything for everybody when they're so they're not even like answering all the calls at the receptionist desk, And we would say, look, the best way you can help us is to really excel at your job and let everybody else do theirs. Mm-hmm. And I think as Christians, sometimes in like trying to promote the kingdom of God and do great things, we extend ourselves in a way that we think is actually getting us ahead and being, audacious for the Lord. But if it's not what he's clearly telling us to do, Jesus was perfectly fine saying no to people and hiding from people and running away from people that wanted things from him, because he's like, that's not my job, is to keep going through the villages, the towns of Israel. Or I was sent to the Jews. That's who I was sent to. And he didn't feel, he felt fine saying no, because he knew that was essential for him to say yes to the one or two things that he had been given to do. And the joy level is so important, because I'm always like, if my wife's joy level is falling, if my joy level is falling, if my kid's joy level is falling, that's an indicator. It's like when you're hungry, you get that rumbling in your tummy. Well, it means you probably should eat something, right? Well, it's, hunger itself is not bad, because if you never got hungry, you would starve to death, right? And so if you didn't lose money in your business when you made poor decisions, you would never be motivated to make better decisions as a business owner. So poverty or hunger is not a bad thing. Losing your joy or discouragement is not always a bad thing either, because it indicates that there's something wrong we need to get to the root of. Either I'm out of sync with the Lord and my expectations, I'm not walking with him, I'm striving for something that I want that he didn't guarantee me, I'm wanting something ahead of time. And so then we got to stop, we got to listen, say, God, what is it you're really trying to tell me? Yes, I know. Like, a lot of times it's pretty clear. We just got to take that time when we lose the joy, stop, listen what God's telling us, listen to what our family members or our team members are telling us, and be willing in humility to say, I was wrong. I'm grateful for what God has given me, and I'm going to be faithful with just that.
That's really good. That's, I was young, and I hadn't learned these lessons yet. I wish I had learned them, because it would have saved my family so much. I feel like I robbed my family of their joy, because I had so many goals that I wanted to fulfill, and I didn't have the spiritual maturity to see those things. So no, this has been just exceptional. So do things on time, minimal waste, always with excellence, and always with joy. So we have some questions from our audience, and I have a couple questions at the end here. Some of these are, I'm gonna answer the first one. I'm not gonna let you answer this one. It says, how is there a biblical approach to ridding garden of rodents and their destructive actions on your food supply? Yes, 22. A good 22 will take care of them. Is there anything that you would say? Is there a biblical grounds for killing God's creatures that are eating my spinach and my lettuce?
Yeah. After in our classes, when we talk about planting a garden, once we get it done, we normally talk about two things that we have a responsibility to do once we've planted our garden, and we've kind of taken an area to say, we are responsible for this. I'm responsible for this little area right here, and that is, I need to protect it, and I need to provide for it and protect it. And that protection just has to do with, the reality that we live in a fallen and broken world. And it also is a reality that we are the managers, and we have the ability to say, we want certain things to grow here and certain things not to grow here. As far as with the, death, so much of making right decisions in life, I think, has to do with making sure that we're living in the right story. And so the story we live in is that the world that God intended to be fell because of man's rebellion. And then God has a plan to restore it one day. So things are not as they should be right now, but they're going to be different later on. And death is one of those things that, it's easy when people, like, I've had some hippie farmer friends that don't know the Lord, but and they just they're like, I love animals. I just wish I had a farm where I could just keep animals and just not ever kill them, And I think the Lord told me around in that context of, what this lady is really yearning for is what's been lost. Death is not beautiful. Death is not wonderful. It's tragic. And we shouldn't want death. And she's longing, she's sensing that something's not right with the world. And she's longing for what once was and what will be. And I can affirm her in that, but at the same time say, but we live in a story where it's not the way it should be. And sacrifice is necessary, for life to continue. And I think honoring life doesn't mean that you don't ever take it. The reality is every single rodent that could eat your plants will die. Every single plant animal that I've ever raised on my farm has died at some point or will die at some point. So there's actually redemption in God allowing us to take that life sooner than it would otherwise be taken. It's not like the animal is going to live forever. It's going to die from something. And I tell you what, like me killing a chicken is a whole lot more humane than the way that raccoons and coyotes killed them.
Yeah.
But there's mercy in like recognizing that there's this animal is going to die, and or this rat or this varmint, is there, and to kill it is, I think an appropriate response. But sometimes we always got to go back to, however, is there something about my management that is causing this animal to do something, like motivating it to come and eat this, where it wouldn't otherwise do it if I was a better manager. For instance, thinking about sometimes, rats and voles don't like going through bulbs or like, anything that's bulbing, like daffodils or onions or bunching onions or garlic and stuff. So maybe I can plant that around my garden to keep them out, rather than just be like, if you step across that line, I'm going to kill you. The rat's just doing what it was designed to do. Is there some way that I can, work within that design and try to prevent it from coming so that it, I don't have to kill that animal. But as far as those animals are concerned, yeah, I haven't had a ton of issue with them, but I do know that diversity in your garden, it has so many benefits, we don't even really recognize it. Monoculture, where you're planting one crop in one place in one area, it's very fragile, because something, can go off and all those plants can die. And God has designed creation to always cover the ground, always have something alive there if at all possible. So when you have a monoculture in any area, it's an imbalance that plants, like what we consider pests, actually come in and target it in order to kill off some of that population to allow space for other species to come in.
Wow.
So it's just doing what they're designed to do. And sometimes pests are a problem because, there's just this unnatural imbalance that is attracting them to that area. And sometimes we can just ask God in humility. He always has the answer. And he might not show it to us all at the same time, but he wants us to have that heart of, God, I don't know how this works. I don't know how to keep rats from eating all my potatoes, but can you help me? Can you show me? Give me eyes to see, humility to try to look at this and to see, why they might be doing that and how my system might be, And like somebody in this comment said, a lot of times you have a lack of predators that are in an area that would otherwise eat those. I kill off all the hawks, which it's illegal to do anyways. But if you did that, then all of a sudden they don't eat the rabbits, which then eat the, and that kind of idea, rather than appreciating what God's put in place. And it's not this idea that we can't choreograph and, eliminate some things and promote some things. Like there's an idea that we have that liberty, but it's underneath the master gardener's design that we need to try to function as closely as possible. And that's partly because God really wants us to learn from him. It's a relationship thing. He's wooing us through this. He wants us to, really see him through all of it. And rats, what did God provide? And again, like in the comments, well, you could have your own predator, dogs. I have dogs around my homestead here, and they keep away a lot of those things. Or, I have chickens. They scratch through all sorts of things in my, orchard or around my barn and stuff. I can use them to go and get those bugs, And that's a part of that appreciating. God's already created some animals to do the exact thing that you already are trying to get rid of. My barn cat's in the barn now. Yeah, they have, keep the things cleared and go and prowl all day long without any money on my part, except they get a little pan of milk every time I milk.
That's really good. Well, no, we've only got 3 minutes left. This has been convicting and inspiring at the same time. That's the ingredients of a great seminar. I'm so convicted. I have chickens here. I got 30 chickens. I've lost over 70. Fox, raccoons, coyotes, and I left the door open 4 weeks ago, and I forgot to close it. And 3 of my best chickens, I had them named even. And what I was thinking about when you were saying that is that I needed, as a good steward, to take some time to look at this. How can I make this more, how could I, like, for example, and we just started it today. We're putting another fence area around the chicken coop, and to make it a little bit more, and we're going to move it. It's way deep in the woods. We're going to move it over to a place where, it's covered by trees, and it's going to be enclosed, a place where predators aren't going to be apt to go to it more as easily. So this has been really encouraging to me. As we close here, the Guild is, I'm really excited about the Guild this year, more excited than any other year for horticulture. Can you just think about this? You don't have to give us an answer now, but I've always been very interested in what plants can we plant that actually help one another grow, rather than not in a monoculture, but in this, what's the opposite of monoculture when you've got many plants growing in the same area? What's that called?
You could say biodiversity.
Okay, yeah, in a diverse area, biodiversity. Just think about coming here and giving us some ideas of what plants really feed off of one another, what plants bring the right kind of bug to take care of the different parasites in other plants. And I think there's some plants that actually provide moisture for other plants and cover for other plants. If you would just think about that, I want to attend your class this year. I want to attend your class in timber framing at the same time. I'm so excited about
both.
Me
too.
We'll put you over near the timber framers so you guys can be near each other.
Don't do that. I wouldn't be able to teach at all.
And then, if you could bring this idea of how do we get this water to be pumping without electricity, I'm telling you, I am so looking forward to that. And so this is going to be an amazing Guild. You got just a few minutes here, a couple of minutes. What would you say as we end this? What's the most important? What are you most passionate about to share with people?
I think I'm as a family, we're really most passionate about helping people to rediscover that joy in, things that we think of as, mundane, like agriculture, or things like gardening that a lot of people grew up hating, or, working with your hands, really returning the joy. A lot around the world right now, even in third world countries, farming has a stigma attached to it that nobody wants to be a farmer. Really? And a lot of that's for good reason, because there's no joy in it. Nobody's making a profit, And so that's a big part of it. And I just think helping us to recognize going to the Lord, being faithful with little before we expand to more is a great place. Everybody's been given something. Start with that and do it on time to a high standard with minimal waste, and God will add joy to your life, and he will add profit at the end of the day. It will be a profitable life. God will be adding to you in that, and it will create this cycle of joy that hopefully will be a witness to others of the redemption that God can bring to any area of our life.
Noah, do you think you'll bring your whole family this summer?
We'll see. We are still talking about it, but definitely everybody wants to come.
Oh, wonderful. I would love to see your wife and kids again. Ladies and gentlemen, Noah Sanders, our privilege. Get his book, Born Again Dirt. Do you have another book out yet, Noah?
I'm trying to work on it, but not yet. Nope.
That curriculum last year was pretty amazing. Again, Noah Sanders. Noah, where can they go and find your information?
Yeah, you can go to redeemingthedirt.com. And you can also, I'd encourage anybody that wants to learn more can go to redeemingthedirtacademy.com. And we have a free kind of online education site there with people interacting from all over the world that are passionate about Jesus, farming, and making disciples.
And if you've never attended a Lamplighter Guild, it is a life-transforming experience. We meet God there, like in ways I can't explain. We're going to be having horticulture, photography, culinary, visual arts. We're going to be having stage acting. We're going to be having, and stage acting this year is going to be with the Rise Collective. They are as good as any Broadway program. We're going to be having filmmaking. We're going to be having biblical theology and It's going to be all of the dramatic arts, sound design, music. We'll be producing audio dramas. We'll be producing a film. And so if you've never signed up to go to Masters Guild, there's scholarships available. And hopefully we'll see you there. It is a once in a lifetime experience. This will be our 12th year. And Noah, every year gets better and better. Only God could do this. You're seeing a picture of the Lamplighter headquarters in the background, an amazing auditorium, recording studio, bindery. God has blessed us. And this is, Noah, this has been the best year of my life. I'm just so excited about what God's doing here with our college, the Masters Guild, and all of you amazing teachers. You're just one of the many. Noah, thank you so much for your time tonight, and bless you and your family.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, God bless you. See you soon. And thanks
All right.
everyone for attending. Hopefully we'll see you at the Lamplighter Guild this summer, July 10th through the 15th. God bless everyone. Good night.